Most people don't come on the internet to share all of the silly mistakes they've made because, of course, it could open you up to a lot of scrutiny. People could be sat there wondering, what was this girl thinking? And yes, I have asked myself that question many times. But in this video, as the title suggests, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the biggest financial mistakes I've made. I've decided to do this because transparency is one of my core principles. And a lot of these mistakes are what led me to develop a sense of financial literacy. So I'm going to walk you through my money story and my journey and some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Malika is my name and I focus on topics around life design. So I look at things such as personal development, finances, and financial literacy, which is what this is about, as well as career pivots. Now, if any of those topics interest you, I'm sure you would enjoy my newsletter. The link is in the bio and be sure to sign up to that. So now, without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, so I'm going to walk you through all of my money making years, okay? So let's start from the beginning. Before I went to college, I decided to take a gap year, and it was mainly because I wanted to wait for my scholarship to come through, one, and two, I wanted to just accumulate a little bit of money. So I was back in my home country of Trinidad and Tobago, and I had a really good time during that year. I learned a lot, met a lot of new people, and it was a whole different experience from being in secondary school. Then I finally moved to Ireland to start medicine in Dublin. Now, guys, the cost of living was a lot different and it was a lot higher than I expected it to be. I didn't really do a whole lot of research prior to kind of making the move. But let's just say any of the money that I would have accumulated over that year of working was spent pretty quickly because you needed an entirely new wardrobe. You know, you had to dress for 4 seasons now. You needed all these winter jackets. You had to buy like duvets and bedding and kitchen appliances. The money, it didn't last too long. I also was on a scholarship. So with that scholarship, they used to give us 900 euros each month to live on. So that had to cover your accommodation. It had to cover everything. For most of my years in college, my accommodation was about 600 euros. So I used to live on about 300 euros a month and I felt pretty comfortable most of the times. I, of course, had a few sticky situations like many college students do, and you just have to figure it out. You have to adapt, you survive, right? So I wouldn't say I had a whole surplus of money while I was in college, but I was still comfortable enough. And I would work during the summers as well to kind of help supplement me throughout the semester so that money helped. And if I was ever really, really stuck, I could always ask my family for money to kind of tide me over until my scholarship money came through. I tried to avoid doing that, but you know, it happened from time to time, and I'm very fortunate in that regard. So as you could imagine, I had to be pretty smart or strategic about my money. Like I didn't have a whole excess to be traveling all around Europe and buying the latest whatever clothes and technology and stuff like that. I would buy what I needed, right? I was living a nice life, but I had to be conservative with my spending. Fast forward to June 2022, I was about 24 at the time, and I finally finished medical school. I was ready to start my first big girl job, which made me happy and excited and elated because finally I'd be bringing in a monthly paycheck, or actually a bi-weekly paycheck, because as doctors we were paid bi-weekly. So I was really looking forward to it, really happy. I had to move from Dublin to a different part of Ireland to do this job. And yeah, I must say I really, really enjoyed making money and seeing money in my bank account. It was a feeling that I could not describe. Now, the base salary for an intern in Ireland at that time was 39k per annum. And this is your gross salary. So this is the salary before taxes are taken out. Now, it's not particularly high when you look at the average salaries in Ireland. However, we would work a lot of overtime. So you accumulate money by doing that. And the money was in my bank account. It was piling up because I wasn't spending too much due to the fact that it was a really walkable city. So I didn't really take much public transport. I would walk to work. I would walk everywhere. I was also not buying any kind of fancy clothing because I would be in scrubs most of the time as I was on surgical rotations. I wouldn't really spend, let's say, on food. I would do a bit of cooking at home, and even if I had to buy food, the food in that city wasn't super expensive. It was quite affordable. And I didn't travel that much during the first year just because I was so focused on work and trying to like figure out what I was doing really, because I would say that's how most of us feel when we're interns. You have no idea what is going on and you're just trying to keep up, trying to learn as quickly as possible. So first year I did okay with money. I was able to save a good bit. So I did that job from June 2022 to July 2023. Then I started working as a senior house officer. So in July 2023 to July 2024, I moved up in ranks. I was a senior house officer now, and I moved to a different city. Now, the good thing about that city was that the cost of living was lower than anywhere I have ever lived before. So you would think that my expenses and everything would go down, but instead I did the opposite, the extreme opposite. And this was my first big mistake. Lifestyle creep, or some might call it lifestyle inflation. Lifestyle inflation happens to many of us, and it's when we start increasing our standard of living and our general expenses when our income increases. Now, lifestyle creep to some extent could be expected. Like if you're making a bit more, I think it's fair for you to want a little bit more, but a lot of us tend to go overboard with it. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what happened with my finances in July 2023 to July 2024 so you can better understand how lifestyle inflation affected me. Now bear in mind, from an intern to an SHU, there's not a huge increase in salary. I went from making 39K as an intern to a base salary of 44K as an SHU. And now this is also gross income. So this is before taxes are taken out, which is still below the average salary in Ireland. But a few things happened. I started traveling a lot more, and sometimes I would just be traveling to Dublin really, or whenever I came to Dublin I would stay at a nice hotel. I would travel to other countries within Europe. I was in London a lot, and London is an expensive place, but I never really felt pushed for money because I had the money in my account, so I didn't really think about it too much. And I was just thinking like, oh, I'm living my life, I'm seeing more places, I'm exploring, all of these things. So I kind of have mixed feelings about that because I do believe that we need to travel if we can, and we need to explore the world and be exposed to different cultures. But at the same time, you need to be securing your money for your future simultaneously. You can't just be focusing solely on YOLO and these kind of things without thinking about the future. So that was one thing. I traveled a lot more. I also spent a lot more money on a lot of kind of personal care things. So I would spend a good bit of money on my hair at that time. I would spend money on things like lashes. I wouldn't say I did a lot of shopping because I'm not really a clothes person per se. I spent money on dining out. So I would go to nice restaurants. I also bought a car that year, but in fairness, I actually needed the car because I was in a rural area now and they didn't have a great taxi service. The buses were kind of inconsistent. So I bought a car. The good news is I bought the car in cash, so it was 10K. It was easy enough for me to pay for it because I had the cash, so I didn't think about it too much. However, I also had to learn to drive, sell the car, and driving lessons in Ireland are quite expensive, so it's like €50 per session. And it took me a full year of driving lessons before I felt confident enough to do the test and start driving on my own. So that set me back a good bit. That year, I also started doing a lot more postgraduate courses. So I did a course in aesthetics and cosmetic dermatology, which also set me back a good bit. That was quite expensive. I think it was like 10 to 11K in pounds. Yeah, I know that's a lot of money, but I went on a payment plan for that one, which I also came to not really enjoy. Like I didn't enjoy being on such a long payment plan. So earlier this year, I made the decision and I just paid it off in full. Some of the other postgraduate courses I did would have been in health tech, and I did one in surgical skills or something like that. And I do believe in education and educating yourself. However, in hindsight, I could have just spaced out things a little bit more and spent some time actually saving money for it. Now, that being said, even though I was spending a bit more, I was still working incredibly hard, which brings me to mistake number 2. So as I mentioned earlier, in Ireland, a lot of our money is made when we're working overtime. So I said the base salary before taxes was 44K. So after taxes, that would amount to 30 something, right? I don't know the exact figure. However, I worked a lot of overtime. If there was anybody that didn't want to work nights, I would take their nights. Anybody didn't want to work this weekend, I'll take your weekend. I was just accumulating shifts because I knew I was going to change careers and I wanted to travel in between that time. So I had this idea that I wanted to go live in Italy for 3 months. So I was just trying to accumulate a little bit more savings. So I was just taking up shifts here and there. I worked a lot. However, I didn't realize how much money I was bringing in. So that's my second mistake. I wasn't really tracking my income. The thing is, every time we were paid, I would have a completely different amount on my paycheck. So some weeks I might make 1,000 something, some weeks I might make 2,000 something. I could even make 3,000 something if I worked a lot of hours for a week. And I wasn't adding up my bi-weekly paychecks in my mind. So I had no idea how much I had each month. I just knew that there was money in my bank account and I was happy with that. Now you might think, okay, so what's the big deal there? Why was that a mistake? So after I finished that job, I decided to take a small break from medicine and go into a different profession. Now, in my mind, I was only making 44K per year, or with the overtime, I thought it would amount to about maybe 60K. So when I went into this new job and they asked me, oh, what would be a good salary? I kept those figures in mind and I would have named a salary based off of that. And when they gave me an offer, I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is nothing I even could have imagined. So I started that new job. I moved back to Dublin, which is the highest cost of living city in all of Ireland. And after some time, I started feeling like, okay, why is it that my money feels like it's not going as far? Why can't I live the same life I was living in Sligo? Like, I have to be looking at my account a lot more constantly now. I have to be checking everything. And at first I put it down to the fact that, well, you're in a higher cost of living city, so maybe the money you were making now, it just isn't stretching as far because the food is more expensive, the transport, every single thing is more expensive in Dublin. But it still felt very restrictive. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. How could I be making more money now, but still feeling like my quality of life has to be decreased? It was only a couple of months ago when I was going through my taxes that I realized that in my 1 year as an SHO, I actually made a gross income of 86K. Now, if you ask me, I would have never realized that. I had no idea that I had made that much money. It really had me wondering, where did all this money go? And how did I not realize that I was making that kind of money? It wouldn't have changed my decision about my new job because there's still lots of perks in terms of flexibility and all of these things that I really wanted. But at the same time, it would have been nice for me to know that figure at the back of my mind because I could have lived my life and planned things accordingly. So needless to say, I had to cut back a little bit on my spending when I moved back to Dublin because everything was more expensive and I was also making less. Now, I've mentioned that I would have moved from working as a house officer, so I did that July 2023 to July 2024, and then my new job, I only started that in September 2024. So for about a 2-month period there, I wasn't working. I was just traveling, I was living my best life, I was enjoying every single moment of it. However, money was not coming into my account and money kept going out. And what happens when money doesn't come in and money keeps going out is that your bank account, it keeps steadily falling. And to make matters worse, while I was traveling, I was still paying rent in Dublin because I wanted to secure this specific spot. Like, I just really liked the accommodation and I didn't want to sublet it or anything like that. Why? I have no idea. Well, to be fair, it's because I had a flatmate and I felt it would be kind of weird to be subletting my room for like a month or two. So I kept paying my rent that was coming out. I was still paying off the diploma that I did. £400 was coming out every month. And I could just see my bank account going down and down and down. And that was when I realized, kids, that we need to have a bit of financial literacy. You need to have money sense. And that is the reason that I started reading books around financial literacy. I read The Psychology of Money. I read I Will Teach You to Be Rich and countless other books. So as you can imagine, by the end of my travel period, there wasn't much money left in the account. And as I said, I don't know where most of the money went, and it was because I wasn't tracking my expenses. So I started implementing that. I realized I was spending a lot of money on things like takeaways, so I had to make changes. I made a lot of changes in my life, just getting that financial sense and that financial literacy. And I'm so happy that these things happened. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been as motivated as I am now to accumulate wealth and money and things along that lines. So I was basically starting from scratch, but I came at it from a much different angle now that I've accumulated a bit of knowledge around finances and financial literacy. So first thing I did was I built up a tiny emergency fund, then I paid off the rest of that diploma because I just didn't like having that debt hanging over me. So I paid off that. Then I worked to build a new, bigger emergency fund. So even though I was smarter and I was wiser and I had more financial literacy than I ever had before, I was still making mistakes because we're all human and we're all learning and all growing and all of that good stuff. So one of the mistakes that I continued to make was that I was dipping into my emergency fund for non-emergencies. For example, one of the things that I used it to buy was Invisalign or clear aligners because there was a sale on and I was like, I need to have this now. You can justify anything that you want to justify. So I said, oh, my teeth will continue to shift. I need to get this now. It's on sale. Let me use my emergency fund to buy Invisalign. So of course that would have set me back, and I spent some of the money from my emergency fund for a lot of other things that I just shouldn't have. So now, of course, I've realized, look, I need to write down what counts as an emergency to me. 1, 2, I now keep my emergency fund in a totally different bank account. So I have to take several steps if I want to take out any of that money. And 3, I just tell myself, look, you're saving for something, you need to get to the 3 to 6 months, stop touching the emergency fund, leave it, let it grow. It's in a high yield savings account, so it's accumulating interest. And I just had to take that mindset shift. So thank you for watching this financial video all the way to the end. Now let me know down in the comment section, are there any financial mistakes of your own that you have made? Or can you even relate to any of mine? Thank you again for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back for more. Bye!